Hello and good afternoon, everyone. This is Toby from the International Association for Political Science Students. I'm live here from the annual convention of the International Studies Association in San Francisco. And right now I'm talking to Medha. Medha is a PhD student at the GIGA Institute in Germany. And tell us a bit about your work, about you as a person at the GIGA right now.
Hi, so my name is Medha. I come from India, and right now I am a PhD student and a research fellow at GIGA, that's the German Institute of Global and Area Studies. And in my PhD, I look at the place of Islam in India's identity and foreign policy discourses. Prior to starting with my PhD, I've worked for a few years in journalism in India and also in Germany and Canada, and looking at issues related to identities, politics, international relations. And well, I decided to delve deeper into a topic, and so decided to do the PhD. So,
yeah, and before we actually talk about what you're doing right now, I would really like to talk a bit about what you've been doing before, because you, as you said, you worked as a journalist in Canada, mainly, but also in India. Is that right?
India as well, yeah.
Why did you first decide to work as a journalist, and why did you later decide to leave journalism behind you and to start a PhD project?
Well, I sort of see the two as connected. I know it's an unusual trajectory in terms of coming into academia, but I was interested in finding out about the world in a way, and I thought journalism is a nice way of being in the thick of things. So that was one of the reasons I went into it. And but at some point, because I was doing daily news reporting, at some point I felt that now I need to delve deeper into a topic, and I've always enjoyed doing research and long-term pieces. So I thought maybe let's get into and do a PhD.
And how exactly did you get interested in the topic that you are working on in your PhD project right now, like religious identities especially?
Well, so while working as a journalist, I covered a lot of issues related to politics and international relations. And specifically when I was working in Canada, I covered issues related to diaspora politics and migrant identities. And over again, the issue of religion seemed to keep cropping up. And after that, I also worked for a while in India at the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, where I worked for a project related to, it was a scenarios-oriented, futures-oriented project, trying to analyze the security situation for India, looking into 25 years into the future. And we looked at both soft and so conventional and non-conventional security issues, and also worked on a project related to India's relations with the Middle East. And while working on this particular project, interviewing diplomats, looking into material about India's foreign policy, historical material, as well as academic material, I realized that although the religious identities do play a role in the formulation of foreign policy, especially in the Indian context, people do study the impact of, say, Hindu nationalist identities, or India's secular identity, or its civilizational identity. But Islam somehow seems to be left behind. And this I found curious, given the fact that India does have the third largest Muslim population in the world. And if you look at the history of India, Islam has played a significant part in political, religious, and social life. So, and in talking to diplomats, sometimes I felt that, especially in relation to India's policies towards West Asia, I felt that consideration of India's large Muslim minority did play a role, and this was something that I didn't find in academic discourses. So I found my gap in a way, and that's how I got into it.
So before moving to my next question, I also want to ask all our followers and viewers at home that you're, of course, invited to raise your questions. And we have the first comment by one of our followers who says, "Good evening. My question is, how many religions has India?" The last part, because there are actually a lot of religions that play a role in Indian culture, if I understand it correctly.
How many religions does India
Yeah.
have? That would be a difficult one to answer. Well, the majority population, of course, is Hindu, and Muslims form the second largest minority, so to say. India also has a significant number of Christian population. There are Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, and a whole lot of religious identities which can't really be categorized into what we call religion in a way. So, yeah.
Are these other religions kind of researched well? So is there someone researching on whether a Christian or a Sikh identity has also framed or constructed influence in foreign policy?
Well, there is some work related to the Sikh Sikh identity, especially because of the constraints of diaspora politics. I mean, there was the separatist movement in Punjab related to the Sikhs who wanted to form their own homeland, Khalistan, and a lot of migrant Sikhs who were living in Canada and in the UK also expressed interest in this in a way. So it became a transnational issue, and that is the angle through which I think it has been explored in terms of foreign policy and how it configures India's foreign policy with Canada, for instance, as became really obvious during the visit of the Canadian Prime Minister to India recently.
So I'm getting curious now about your work that you're doing. What were your major findings till now when it comes to these identities of Islam in foreign policy, or the ideational influences on foreign policy?
So in my work, I am looking at historical, how Islam was historically constituted in terms of Indian identity, in the sense that the colonial period was the time when one of the major axes of conflict, which even exists, social conflict that exists, social and political conflict that exists in India even today between Hindus and Muslims, sort of came into being. And this idea that Hindus are indigenous to India, and Muslims who came from outside and have a completely distinct culture and form an entirely separate nation, sort of this notion comes into being during the colonial period, and sort of goes along with the anti-colonial struggle in a way. So while there is this notion that India is multicultural, multi-faith, secular, multi-religious society, there is another notion that India is a primarily Hindu country and Muslims don't belong here. And so I wanted to explore this sort of, I don't know how to put it, this divide, or how this became constituted, and also because it wasn't always so. And I wanted to recover these various discourses. And India also has a very syncretic history. And I think I mentioned earlier that there are these other religions which can't really be categorized. The categorization into Hindus and Muslims also came into being in a way as a result of the census that the British conducted. And the very idea that the knowledge that Muslims are a minority in India did not exist before the census, for instance.
Okay. The paper that you're presenting here at ISA is relating to one writer, one intellectual, who has given provided very particular ideas. Can you tell us a bit more about this certain project?
This paper is also part of my PhD project. And so as part of the project, as I mentioned earlier, I look at various discourses of Islam in India historically. And this particular thinker, practitioner who I look at here is Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. He's a really well-known, towering personality in Indian historical discourses and Indian anti-colonial struggle. He was a member of the Indian National Congress, and as part of the anti-colonial struggle, he set himself against the partition of India. As a Muslim, he felt that he belonged to India, but at the same time, he also did not want to deny his Muslim and Islamic identity. I mean, so growing up in India, you grew up with stories about, in school, you grew up with stories about these people, but actually delving into his writings, I realized that the notion of identity and community that comes across doesn't really fall into the normative scope of Indian nationalism. I mean, he's usually constructed as an Indian nationalist and constructed against Jinnah and the other people who agitated, Muslim nationalists who agitated for the partition of India and the homeland for Pakistan. While his ideas were clearly different from these people, in a way, I find it difficult to translate his concepts into the language of international relations. The notion of identity or the notion of self that he constitutes for himself is one which transgresses both religious and national boundaries. And I think he draws on the resources of Islam. He was also a theologian, so he was a very well-respected Muslim theologian. And he draws upon Quranic concepts to sort of bring the Muslims into the anti-colonial struggle. So he sort of reconceptualizes jihad as something that can be used in anti-imperial terms. And he also calls for solidarity with other colonized people. So he calls for Muslim solidarity with other colonized people. And in doing so, he positions himself in a way in the intersection of these two circles. And culturally, he draws a lot upon resources from the Middle East, from Turkey. So when you look at his writings, they are peppered with quotations from the Quran, from poets from Persia, from Arabia. He refers to his education in Al-Azhar University in Cairo. So what comes across is a very mobile sense of self, which does not fall neatly into these categories, which as citizens of a country, you are asked to sort of fall into. And that I found really fascinating.
And obviously LS is also finding this really interesting, because he asks whether your research material that you're working on right now is actually accessible, whether he can read it somewhere.
Does he mean my paper, or?
I think so.
Well, it is not available right now, but I will be posting it on the ISA website. So it should be accessible indeed.
All right. And then Florian is also asking you a question. He says, sounds like fascinating research. I have a question regarding Hindutva. How does the political concept of Hindutva reconcile the fact that 15% of the Indian population, almost 200 million, are Muslim? Is this simply constructed via the idea that they simply do not belong in India?
Yeah, so I think the concept of Hindutva in many ways conceives of identities in a way which is very opposite to how I was describing. Hindutva politics also comes into being as part of the anti-colonial negotiation of India, and in a way draws upon the concept of nation as it arose in Europe with its singular identities, singular ethnicities, one language. And to them, Muslims are indeed foreigners in India. So and this fact becomes more I think, significant for them in the context of partition. So a lot of the debate is about, well, they got their nation, what are they doing here in India, for instance? But they also make the concession in a way by saying, well, all Muslims of India are people who converted to Islam, so they are originally Hindus. So as long as they sort of accept that aspect, they can stay in India. So as long as they accept the light culture, so to say, of India being Hindu, then it's fine. Yeah.
Is this development of spreading Hindu nationalism as a popular idea in politics undermining the influence of these ideas, these alternative ideas that you're researching, or is it rather denying the fact that they are not Hindu ideas, but originating from Islam?
Well, there is definitely denial at work over here, in the sense that a lot of practitioners of Hindutva, for instance, want to deny that Urdu is an Indian language, when actually there is you can't really make a distinction between Urdu and Hindi except in terms of the script in which it is written. And this also comes into being, again, during the colonial period, when people spoke a vernacular, and it was written in both scripts. It was written primarily in the Persian script because, at least in the North India, because of the Mughal influence. But the construction of Hindi and Urdu occurs during this period, and to then deny Urdu as a part of Hindi cannot exist without the use of Persian and Arabic vocabulary. So yes, I mean, that's an example, for instance, of the denial at work here. Yeah.
Okay, but if you look at today's foreign policy of India, where do you see a development from the historical origin of these concepts that you're talking about to now? So are there practical examples within Indian foreign policy where you would say, okay, there we can definitely still see that these ideas are at work?
Well, I think there have been shifts over a period of time. So one can see that immediately after independence, and especially in the context of partition, India tried its best to maintain a connect with what it calls West Asia or Middle East. This was through, for instance, India tried for a very long time to join the Organization of Islamic Conference, claiming that it has a large Muslim population and it should be a member. And it even got itself invited to the first meeting. But in the event, the Pakistani ambassador created that led to a diplomatic row, and India could never really end up joining the organization, but it tried for a really long time to become a member on the basis of its Muslim population. And then just immediately after independence, the ICCR, which is the Indian Council of Cultural Research, was set up. And the very first relations that it tries to establish is with the countries of the Middle East and Turkey, for instance. So this is very much at work. And in many ways, as I found as part of my doctoral research, India's participation in Asia-Africa solidarity and also non-aligned movement in a way was a way of keeping in maintaining this relationship, or which maintaining this alternate geography in a way which Islam and the history of Islam and its Muslim population opened up for India in a way. And there have, of course, been ups and downs in these policies. And right now, the current government is also trying, in a way, to overturn some of these policies. And you can see that in with respect to, for instance, abstention on the Palestine question in the UN. or India's closer relations with Israel now. But also the fact is that the Ministry of External Affairs is a bureaucratic organization, and there are always continuities.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a significant number of Indian people work in West Asia, which means that we have to maintain relations with them. So these things will continue to, I think, have, I think these legacies will continue to have an impact, is what I think. Yeah.
To close our, or to come to an end with our great talk here, I have one last question to you, which is whether you think after your PhD you would like to go back into journalism and to with all this theoretical knowledge that you now have, can contribute to journalist discourses and to reach another public with this knowledge that you now have, or whether you think it would be now more effective to work within academic discourses. I think it's a question that probably a lot of young scholars have, like how can I like bring in my ideas? How can I apply the knowledge that I just learned? What do you think?
Well, that's a question I have been asking myself a lot as well. I think when I started with my PhD, I thought I've had enough of journalism and now I would want to get into academia perhaps. But during the course of my PhD, I realized that I do want to reach out to a wider audience beyond academic circles. I really do enjoy working on theoretical concepts, but I also understand and realize that unless we connect with the broader world, there's not much that we can do within the academia. So I would definitely like to keep the option open, and if I can in some ways do both, that would be ideal. So perhaps write some opinion pieces and articles while working as an academic.
Yeah. Great. Thank you a lot. We are very happy that we had you here today. And thank you for taking the time, talking to us, answering the questions of our audience. And wish you all the best till next time.
Thank you. I had a great time too.